I mean, one thing you mentioned during that is you're looking at ways to monitor the impact of engagement. And I guess one of the great powers that the BPS has is accreditation of courses around the country. Um, you mentioned that you're hoping to find out, whether courses already have, considered inclusivity in their curriculums. How far ahead is that process? And, would you at some point have minimum standards for courses in order to get accreditation?
Yeah. Do you want me to take that, or you, Nazrin?
Shall I start and then you can pick up the sort of bits in terms of BPS? I guess in terms of the task force and in terms of thinking about that, we have been looking at both the undergraduate and the postgraduate in terms of applied psychology. So the undergraduate stuff, I think there's quite a lot being done already in the BPS, and Neil will talk a bit more about that. But where people are kind of moving towards, minimum standards. I mean, there's a sort of time frame which apparently takes many years to kind of go through, that iteration. But I think there will be across the board minimum standards. One of the issues, I think, which isn't quite resolved, and it's about decolonizing the curriculum, is how do you do that, and how do you get everybody to agree to that quickly? And that's quite difficult, I think. It's a very involved process, because if you look, and this happens inside the society, and I'm sure it happens at universities, there's a massive range between some people who want to kind of decolonize it and they're ready to go, they know what they're doing, and other people haven't even thought about it, they haven't even started, they don't think there's any need, and they think BPS is just being odd. What are they up to? They're being political. So we get quite a lot of all this kind of, they're supposed to be a sort of sensible professional body. What are they up to, changing things, that we've used for, why are they changing the textbooks? Because we used those for the last 100 years. What's wrong with them? So there's a massive cultural gap, I think, to meet before you can change everything to move towards a uniform direction. So I suppose strategically, people have different views on that. And I'm sure BPS will have their own view on that. But I suppose my view on that is that some people you have to kind of push along, and other people you have to sort of coach into getting to the position. But what you can't do is suddenly change people from one end to the other, because it'll be anarchy. So for the people who want to change it, it's quite frustrating, because it will be an iterative process over time. I don't think it's going to be let's do a big bang and start again from the beginning. So personally, that's what I think we need to do in psychology. Most of it is complete nonsense now in some of the curricula, because it's actually based on really old kind of ideas in psychology that some of us have discounted many years ago, and other people are now coming around to discounting. But to turn that on its head would be very difficult. But I suppose one of the things I'd say when we've had our discussions is that when people are teaching and they're using those materials, you can put them into the context of the history. And that's a very quick way of decolonizing the curriculum. So you can say, we used to think this about IQ, and these people used to think this was the way to go forward. And there's still people researching this like this, but actually there's this other, sort of more of a critical perspective. So you don't have to have it written down in the minimum guidance. You could just start now. All you guys could start doing that now if you had the willingness to do that, because it's in your hands, it's in your gift.
Yeah. I mean, certainly like in Manchester, what we run into time and time again is it's about resources, and it's, we have people in biological psychology, but not just within psychology. If you go into the biological sciences courses, who say, oh, well, blood flow is blood flow. And so, how do you, have any kind of inclusive curriculum when you're thinking about those kind of issues? This is, this came up in Ken Keith. He said, well, actually, if you're at different altitudes, you get changes in blood flow. So, if you live in Peru or like in places where there is a higher altitude, it does actually have an impact. And the other, I think, thing that was really interesting is that had Danielle Bassett over in I think Pennsylvania has done studies looking at citations of authors from different backgrounds, and show there's a consistent kind of under citation of researchers from different backgrounds. So there are many things that people could start thinking about, start focusing, but it's awareness, and it's a very challenging.
It's which textbooks you use as well. So the BPS at some point will have like a different view on that. So there will be kind of like minimum standards with that. But that doesn't stop people doing it already. The resources are out there. They're just not mainstream. Now, if we're waiting for the BPS to mainstream everybody, remember, as an organization, they'll have to bring the people who are saying what you're on about with us. It will take them a long time. And this is where the BPS always gets in trouble from the outside, that people think we're not being fast enough. But we actually are. It's just we've got to bring everybody, not just the people who already know.
Yeah.
The task force are the converted. You know, Nils the converted. So the people who don't want to move because actually for whatever reason, you know, sometimes a good reason because it's difficult, sometimes a bad reason because they sit in privilege.
Yeah.
And they don't want to move from that chair.
Yeah.
They do not want to move themselves off the chair of privilege. It's very difficult, but the BPS still has to account for those people as well because it's a membership organisation. I suppose the strategy, I would say, I know I'm monopolising and I'll shut up in a minute, let the other guys have a go, but the strategy is quite interesting because this is the bit that the membership forget and I think is quite important, which is that the BPS has responsibility to the members, but it also as a charity has responsibility for society and changing things in society and using psychology for the power of good. And that is the bit that's been underemphasized over its history in the BPS. And that is the bit where inclusion is directly in that path. And as Neil was saying, human rights in that path. And so if we, that is emphasizing the strategy. Do you want to say something, Neil?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and just to go back to what you were saying at the beginning, Niles, in terms of, you know, that kind of tick box kind of process of how do we assess kind of universities and courses.
Yeah.
We've begun, like I said, the process of beginning to look at the undergraduate education committee, looking at how all of those assessments are made. And one of the things that we're really keen on doing, and we've begun the process of doing, is opening up BPS a bit. Sometimes we're kind of quite internal looking in terms of the way we operate. So actually, we've just begun to work in partnership with Advance HE in terms of looking at how do we assess universities in terms of some of these equality considerations. Are universities involved in the Race Equality Charter? Are they involved in Athena Swan? Are they kind of really pushing ahead in terms of driving equality and diversity and, you know, and making sure that it's embedded across all of their structures? So some of this is also about us opening up at BPS and actually saying, we can't just sit and talk to ourselves all the time. We need to actually open up and begin to talk to professional bodies that are also involved in a lot of this journey and a lot of this work, and ensure that there's a dovetailing between the two as part of that process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and take advantage of the frameworks that are already there, the very helpful frameworks.
Yeah, yeah.